Zain Verjee at the Global AI Summit on Africa. We are bringing you a special podcast series of Embedded here in Kigali, Rwanda, in partnership with the Rwanda Centre for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I'm so excited to have as a guest on our show the Honourable Minister for ICT and Innovation, Paula Ingabire. Thank you for joining us, Honourable Minister Paula Ingabire, on Embedded here in Kigali. Thank you so much for having us here. And a huge congratulations to you.
Thank you.
For an amazing conference over 2 days where you had a range of entrepreneurs, innovators, thought leaders, government, covering the key topics around AI. How do you feel?
Very excited. I know when I started off, I was already excited to see this many people coming together, and obviously for a very important topic. But what I'm more excited about is the quality of conversations that we've had over the last 2 days, the quality of engagements and networking that has happened, but also the fact that we're all living very optimistic that we truly can shape what the future of AI will look like for Africa.
Over the last 2 days, and with the range of conversations, what surprised you? What did you find that was your big takeaway that you didn't expect?
Well, I must say the one thing that surprised me the most was when you look, especially for the startups, for the young innovators, seeing the level of interest they have in engaging with everyone. So usually when you have policy-related type of conversations, sometimes it feels like, okay, are these policies even right? Is it what they're looking for? But you could see an appetite to really connect with different policymakers, to connect with the entire ecosystem and understand what is it that it's going to do to unlock this for them. But I must say also what was very exciting was the type of innovations that you see, the full range this afternoon, and which I know you also did. I think there was a specific focus on the creatives industry, and you could see how people are really harnessing AI, whether it's for, videos development, for different types of creatives. And you would imagine that most of them would be thinking about agriculture and healthcare, because those seem to be like the eminent challenges that we're facing as society and trying to solve for. But really seeing that they're also, because mostly when you look at the creatives industry, you have very young people. And to see that all of them are excited about how they can use AI to promote the work that they're doing, it's amazing.
And what was striking to me consistently was how Rwanda is leading the AI charge on the continent. There are many other countries doing incredible work, but you've taken on a role and pushed the agenda for generative AI on the continent in a very profound way. In your role, what is your ambition for Rwanda?
Well, let's say for Rwanda to start with, when you think about why we're pushing on this, we've done our homework in really understanding the value of what AI can create for us. And in many ways, when we look at it, we also have the really humble recognition that this is something that we can't do alone. It's something where for everything that we need to unlock as prerequisites for the success of AI adoption in Rwanda and beyond requires that we have the right partners at the table. We have the right collaboration even amongst ourselves as policymakers. But you also understand that all of this is not going to be possible if you don't have a solid industry, players, startups, the startup ecosystem that is sort of like driving AI development and creation. And so with that, that's why we were able to, come together and say, how do we bring the continent together and really think through some of these fundamental issues, which I believe everyone is probably grappling with and not talking to each other. And let's figure out solutions together.
And one of the main challenges is skilling our talent. It's the hugest opportunity,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
1 in every 4 people by 2050 will be in Africa. The mean age on the continent is 19, 1.2 billion people. We know all of this, and it's our dividend, right? What is Rwanda? What are you considering when it comes to strategies, practical plans to build and skill people in industries?
Let me start off with this, Zain, and I made this point yesterday. Let's assume that AI is a cake we're baking. There's all these ingredients that we need to have in place. And I think when you look at, let's pick 5 top ones. There's data, there's skills, and I'll come back to the question you're asking me about. There's the compute infrastructure, there's the regulatory environment. Now, when you look at all of this and the use cases, obviously, when you look at all of this, we have some, I may say, advantages for ourselves as a continent, and skills is one of them because of the youthful population that we have who will be more open to using AI, but also building AI solutions. And so, of course, the things that fundamentally we're all struggling with and require the coming together on the infrastructure side and regulatory side. But when I think about skills, for me, it's more like a low-hanging fruit for us. So what is Rwanda doing? We've had the privilege of having partners like Carnegie Mellon University that has been in Rwanda for more than 10 years now. And they've been delivering master's level degree programs. And today they have an engineering in AI program they're doing. You have the Africa Institute for Mathematical Sciences that is doing both PhD level and master's level programs in AI, machine learning, and natural language processing. But at the end of the day, those are also not enough. Right now, about 5 years ago, we created the Coding Academy. We're bringing in very brilliant 13-year-olds into a 3-year program. And it's amazing to see
It's amazing the 13-year-olds are
like
but
killing. This is where you need to test them when they're still excited and they're willing to experiment and they have. But what we're increasingly seeing is that we're going to have to attract more partners that will come in to help us to build the talent that we need, but at the same time to also create the market that absorbs them. Because it's one thing to build the talent, but if they don't have anywhere to go, and I feel like we won't be able to get to capitalize on what we've been able to do.
And the other piece that we talked a lot about was the investment ecosystem.
Yes.
And innovative financing.
Yes.
What's the fastest route, in your view, to at least getting kickstart and building superpowers?
My firm belief is that money follows talent. Without the right talent, it will be difficult to create that investment ecosystem that we're looking for. Now, granted, there are things where we'll be able to mobilize funding for quite easily. If we're talking about compute infrastructure and you're able to make a good business case, and when I say about a good business case, it's us as government and our big private sector players thinking about what does demand look like, and being able to aggregate that demand, putting it at the table, inviting the hyperscalers, the mid-level type of companies, and allowing them to come and create that space. But at the same time, you need this kind of funding that will help. And I think this afternoon, early this morning, we launched the AI Scaling Hub with the Bill and Gates Fund.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. But these startups that have proven AI solutions are going to need much more funding than the $7.5 million that we're starting with the Gates Foundation. And so the ability to attract the VCs and to come in here and look at this potential is also going to depend on the quality of the talent that we have here creating these quality solutions that then make a good business case.
You're listening to a special series of our Embedded podcast in Kigali, Rwanda, where I am here at the Global AI Summit on Africa.
Right now, AI only works for major languages such as English and French. This presents an issue in Africa when it comes to accessing quality data sets that power AI technologies. You see, 76% of Rwandans only speak Kinyarwanda. Over the last 7 years, we have created data sets of over 3,400 hours of Kinyarwanda. We have now scaled to 14 other countries in Africa with data sets covering 16 additional languages. We're accelerating our work with the support of the Rwanda Centre for Fourth Industrial Revolution, expanding African language footprint in AI technologies. By providing this foundational infrastructure, innovators can create AI solutions that reflect Africa's linguistic diversity and unique cultural realities.
You're listening to a special series of our Embedded podcast in Kigali, Rwanda, where I am here at the Global AI Summit on Africa. You may hear a little bit of noise, some hammering, some equipment being dismantled in the next part of the conversation I'm going to be having with the minister, but that's just because the conference is over and we're having this conversation, so nothing to worry about if you hear a little hammering. What also struck me, and you had made this point in a prior conversation, was the importance of ethics.
Yes.
And how guardrails and ethical values are framed in all the work that you're doing. What values does Rwanda prioritize, say, as opposed to Silicon Valley?
We almost have the similar values across the board. One of them is around transparency. I think that's a key value for us in really understanding the transparency of the data, how it's being collected, how it's being analyzed. privacy is a critical one for us as well. And that's why for Rwanda, even before we were able to state and build a national AI strategy and policy, the first thing we had to do is put in place the data protection and privacy law to think about really, what does this mean? Because if you're talking about privacy, you must also have these pieces of legislation that sort of support on that. And obviously now as we think about the values, you're also looking at what's the data that we're training these models on? Where are we getting this data? How accurate is this data? How reliable is it? How relevant is it to the problems that we're going to use data to solve for? And so these are some of the things that we're all looking at, and also making sure that bias doesn't come through.
Which is a hugely critical factor for even current language models where bias is baked in.
Yes.
Which forces how do we build our own models to ensure
models to do exactly that
it's not the case.
Yeah.
And that our cultural context
is taken into consideration. Yeah. And talking about cultural context, I think this is where the power of working with the local ecosystem comes into play, because the local players or the local startups will always have a great understanding of what the cultural context is and the nuances around that. And that makes it easy to make sure that they are backing that into how they're building the models. But I don't want to take it for granted or to make an assumption that that is going to happen. This is why we have to put in place all these guidelines to ensure that that is done. And, those biases do not stem through even how the teams are composed. I mean, some of the biases we're always concerned about, even gender biases. But if you don't have a team that is well balanced to make sure that all perspectives are being taken into consideration, then you may end up building solutions that may not be fit for purpose for a certain gender. And so these are things that I feel like we will be working very closely with the tech companies and making sure that, they're paying attention to this. And it's great that this is a conversation that everyone is having globally, which really forces us then to make sure that how are we ticking the box on all of these things to make sure that, these ethics are taken into consideration as we design and build these solutions.
And we're so immersed in technology. You're so immersed every single day in the changes that are drastically happening around us. What human quality have you observed cannot be replaced by technology today?
Empathy for sure, because and I always say this because when people are worried about what AI can do and the models and everything, at the end of the day, I think the concerns most people have on what will these solutions, automated, solutions do, is that they may not have that empathy that a human being would have, and which would feed into the decision that they must make. And so for me, and again, there are very many schools of thought around this point that I'm going to make, around whether or not AI is going to replace human beings and jobs and all of that. But I think the way we design it, and coming back to what are the values we're looking for, is we can be very deliberate about designing AI solutions that complement and augment the roles of human beings. And if we can do that, then we have a world that is fulfilling, as opposed to creating the fear and stigma where people feel like, okay, this job is, I don't even know if I'm going to have a job in the next 5 years. And so people will be living a depressed life, just worried about what's going to come. But again, this is where the aspect of values and comes in very strongly as we design these solutions.
You mentioned partnerships, and you mentioned Carnegie Mellon, and there have been a lot of foreign partnerships and relationships that have come into Rwanda. What, in your view, is the greatest misconception foreign companies have when they come here, and what is it that they need to unlearn to be successful?
That's a very good question, Zain. So the biggest misconception I feel like most companies have is they come looking at us from a lens of market size. But those that have already come and at least experimented to work with us, one thing they quickly learn is that with Rwanda, things move very fast. So one, their willingness to get things off the ground. And obviously, any foreign company that is looking to break into the African market is looking for a place where they can have a success story, a place where they can show impact. And so the ones that we've had have been our biggest and best, greatest ambassadors, because they've come in, been able to test and prove things. Yes, if a 13 to 14 million market isn't big enough for them, but they've been able to say, this is what we've done in Rwanda, brought in more partners to show the work they've been able to do, and they've been able to scale across the continent. And so, and that's one. And obviously, these are things that will change. I mean, for many businesses and, private sector companies, you're always looking at the bottom line. You always need to make sure that you have the right market where you feel like scale will happen and make business sense. But I feel like that's one thing that every time people come in, they're thinking, are we sure about this market? It's too small for us. But the minute they start to realize that things actually work and can move, and we're willing to bet on them as much as they're willing to bet on us, I think that gives them the confidence to then do business with Rwanda.
That's a great point. And you hear that all the time, Nigeria's market size, Kenya's market size, and, Rwanda's a smaller market, but then you get things done.
Yes. And we need to we need to work more on making sure that we're getting more things done, because really that's what is really going to unlock many of these opportunities for us.
I heard a lot of technologists, big visions, and then there are rural areas that need some basic things.
Yeah.
How do you see the tension between technologists, big visions on the one hand, and what families and communities in rural parts of the country as well as the continent face? How do you see the tension?
Now, I mean, the tension does exist, but again, it comes back to nations deciding what inclusion looks like for them. And for Rwanda, really, for the last 30 years, inclusion has been a big aspect on how we drive most of our development investments. Today, if you came into Kigali and I wanted to see a doctor easily, I could make a phone call, I could, find the nearest hospital and go and find them. If you go to rural parts of Rwanda, this is where technology then helps to bridge that gap. And in fact, when you look at some of the AI use cases that we're going to start with, a lot of them are focused on the underserved areas, because we know the places where you have fundamental systematic problems and challenges of infrastructure and skills, that's where you see the value of AI coming in to bridge that gap. Giving you an example, the work that we're doing to create, an AI chatbot for our community health workers. These are our very frontline health workers when it comes to delivering primary health care. And so being able to build an AI solution that allows them to get medical advice in a timely manner, but also means they do better diagnosis at the very fast level of intervention. And then you also relieve the burden on the entire healthcare, value chain. So that for us is one thing where we say, with everything that we're going to do, we don't want to widen the gap between rural and urban areas. And so we have to make sure that at least the solutions we are investing in as government are solutions that are going to reach the people that most deserve these kind of solutions.
And finally, what is your message to young women in Rwanda and across the continent and in the diaspora about AI and their future?
It's very simple. We want to make sure that women, at least I want to make sure that women are not just seen as potential users of these AI solutions. What we want is to see more women building these solutions, leading in the AI age, but also being active players in this ecosystem.
And profiting.
Absolutely. And so I want to tell women that anything that any young man can do anywhere on this continent, they can do too. And so they shouldn't sit back and wait for solutions to be designed for them. They should take a lead in actually designing solutions that make the most sense for them and create the economic opportunities for them.
And there's no other country on the continent that has proven that. I would just like to say, in case you don't want to say that, and it's Rwanda, because it's been phenomenal how women have led this country in an extraordinary direction. And thank you for your message of inspiration for young women, never to feel intimidated or that AI and machine learning is not a space.
It's not for them.
It is.
Yes, it is.
And you really are a champion of that. So thank you so much, Honorable
Thank you very
Minister.
much, Zain.
We really appreciate it. And I wish you a good 2-day sleep.
Thank you. And I wish you a safe trip back home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a special episode of Embedded coming to you from Kigali, Rwanda. I'm Zain Verjee, and it's so wonderful to be here and have some fantastic conversations for the Global AI Summit on Africa. Please make sure you stay connected to us. You can go to our Substack and follow the rundown.studio. You can also go to the Embedded podcast on Spotify. Thanks so much.